Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Monday morning, January the 24th, 6 o'clock a.m. here in Calgary, Alberta. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and if you'd like to hang out in the chat room, that's great. I'm going to pop the link in there to what I want to talk about today. It's really the last article on mentalhealth.net that I wanted to take a look at. And I thank everybody for tuning in. I appreciate everybody listening to my shows. I do so many shows, and I thank anybody who's listening to my shows. Thank you so much. And so I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, and just wanted to be one more voice speaking out against abuse and standing up for survivors, right? And so you have to listen at your own discretion to all my shows. And I'm covering the topics of abuse, right? It's very sensitive material, and I don't sugarcoat it. I just tell it like it is. So a lot of people, you may find my show uncomfortable or, that it's just too sensitive of material. So you have to know what's good for you to listen to. So I just ask everybody to listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, you should have permission to listen to my shows. The reason why is because I believe in protecting children at all times. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're standing up to fight to save children's lives. That's what we're doing, and so you have to be very careful what you're doing when there's a chat room present, and know how to keep yourself safe online, right? So if you're a young person listening to this, you should have somebody listen with you, like an adult who's older, who can help you make the decision whether you should be listening or not, age appropriately, right? And I'd appreciate that. Keep yourself safe, right? So we'll get right into the show here this morning, and I just want to finish this one website up here before we move on. And there's an article on here that's called "If You or Your Children Are Currently Experiencing Abuse," and I think this is just so important, for people to hear about. You know what I mean? Like there's so many people right now who are in this situation, who are being abused. It's absolutely horrific, and it bothers me every day. It bothers me. Because I know, I grew up in this stuff, right? So I know it's a reality for so many people. It's a reality for so many people today. You know what I mean? Because it's my past doesn't mean it's not a reality for a lot of people, and that's really sad. Because my heart just goes out to people who are suffering in this. I have Gypsy Witch in the chat room and some guests, and Gypsy Witch said she can't hear me, so I'm hoping. I'm hoping that if you just refresh, you might be able to hear the show. So hopefully it's streaming, right? I did have some problems with Blog Talk Radio last week, so I don't know. It's been kind of strange for the last week. So hopefully everybody can hear me. I had one show that was like cutting in and out, and I was actually speaking just normally into my microphone. So I'm just not sure what's happening with my Blog Talk connection, but hopefully you'll be able to hear what I'm saying. I hope so. So this particular article comes from mentalhealth.net and www.mentalhealth.net. It's written by Catherine Petruccelli. She wrote a whole bunch of articles on here regarding abuse and domestic violence and child abuse and effects of abuse and everything. So she's written this article called "If You or Your Children Are Currently Experiencing Abuse," and she wrote that in 2005, but it doesn't matter because it's still good information. And you can go and check out all the stuff that she's written. She's not the only one who contributes on this website. There's a whole lot of therapists and counselors and psychologists and stuff who actually write on this website. And this website actually covers everything really to do with mental health issues, right? And it also, they have this one section about abuse, right? So there's a whole section on abuse, right? So you can go and check this website out. And I went through it pretty good, and there's all kinds of good info on there, actually. So be sure and check it out. There's loads of stuff and links and resources and just all kinds of good stuff, right? So I'm just going to read from the page and just talk about, what she's talking about there and just kind of go through some of this stuff. She says, "It may seem like you are alone in your pain and that there is nowhere to turn for help. To combat the abusive situation in your life, you must learn how to develop an effective plan for escaping abuse and getting help to put yourself into a better situation." And, I mean, that's really the truth right there. The people who are being abused, domestic violence and abuse and child abuse and whatnot, I mean, little babies and small children really are at the mercy of their parents, obviously, or the whoever's abusing them. There's not much they can do. Little toddlers can't walk over and pick up the phone and explain what's happening to them. Small babies in the crib absolutely can't do that. younger children quite often won't get help because they've been told their lives have been threatened, that if they tell anybody about the abuse, they'll be killed, or someone in the family will be killed or whatever. And then a lot of people, just adults and older children, don't tell anybody anyway because of the fear and the shame surrounding it, and a lot of fear sometimes. People are just afraid for their lives. They don't want to they don't want to report the abuse because then they're afraid of what will happen if they do. There's all these different issues surrounding this whole issue of abuse, and that's why it makes me sick, and that's why it bothers me that so many people are actually still going through this, and so many of us have gone through this. It just makes me so completely ill to think about this, because I grew up like this, so I know how absolutely disgusting and how hard it is for people to try to survive that. It's absolutely just ridiculous. And like she's right. She says it may seem like you are alone in your pain. There's nowhere to turn for help. I know I felt like that for many years, and there are so many of us out here who have been through this. So you're not alone in it, that's for sure. But the thing is that that's the sad part. It would be really great if there was just one of us, one person on the planet that was ever abused, and you could almost think, well, at least I'm the only one. And you might actually find some sort of peace in that. But just knowing how many people and how many children and how many other people are being abused, it's just mind-boggling when you think about it. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous that people should be treating people or their children or anyone else abusively. It just makes me mad that people do that sort of stuff, right? It's very, very frustrating. So yeah, I mean, you're not alone in this, and if you feel that you are, you're really not, but you have to reach out. I know I didn't reach out for help until really about, I'd say, last 2 years, right? Before that, I mean, I've always talked to people about my past and told many people about it, but not professionals, and I certainly didn't reach out to survivors of abuse, right? Because I wasn't really disclosing the abuse in that manner. I would just tell close friends, people who I thought I could trust, right? And then it generally didn't go well, because once they found out that I was abused, they kind of thought maybe, well, she's too needy. So a lot of people, it would sort of turn the relationship into a different direction, in a different direction, and people would find it uncomfortable to be around me or whatever. And that's after them disclosing some of their abuse to me, you know what I mean? And then I'd tell them about my story, and then they'd be like, well, you're just too much, and it's kind of sad, but people, not everybody is in the place or frame of mind to be able to help somebody out who's going through their adult survivor issues, so I think that's why it's really important to reach out to groups who are actually capable of handling that sort of stuff, right? So what I did was, a few years ago, about 2 years ago to be exact, I actually joined an online support group for adult survivors of child abuse, and it was great because I got to talk to people who had experienced stuff similar to me, and it really helped because I knew that they knew where I was coming from, and I knew that they knew the type of pain that was going on in my heart, the type of issues that we all survived with. We all had something to share and something in common, and I think that was very awesome for me. I liked that because it was online. I could go on there when I wanted to, and but some people might not like that. See, so some people might feel like a counselor's better or a therapist is better, and so you just have to do like what works for you. Make sure that you do reach out and get some help though, because there is good help out there, but you just have to think about, do you want a group support type thing, or would you rather just keep it a one-on-one type thing where you can share your experiences with a counselor or therapist, and they can try to help you work through it without other people knowing about it, sort of thing. Because a lot of people, everybody's different, right? So what works for me might not work for you, and what works for somebody else might not work for me, sort of thing. But she says, here, I'm going to read on. Many people feel helpless, overwhelmed, and vulnerable when they are in an abusive situation, and you are likely to feel emotionally tied to the abuser and ambivalence about leaving. It says, while ambivalent feelings are understandable, you must realize that abuse is not healthy or safe, and that it will continue indefinitely unless you find the courage to get out. So, many people feel helpless, overwhelmed, and vulnerable when they're when they're being abused, when they're in an abusive situation. Absolutely, you do. And I know, looking back on as a child, of course you feel helpless. There's not much you can do as a child, right, to change things in the home, especially if you grow up in a violent, abusive, dysfunctional home. You're sort of stuck in that. But when you get older, as a young teen and even into my late teens and early adulthood, I actually was still in this abusive cycle with my friends as well as at home. And then in my, my later years, I actually the same people that I was hanging around with as teenagers, some of them got into these domestic violence situations with their partners, and because they were abused as children, and they went right into a life of abuse again, just like my mom, right? They were abused as children and then ended up in these ridiculous abusive relationships with these people. And, it is scary. It's even scary as an adult because, your life is still like my life was still being threatened. My life was being threatened as a child. Then it was being threatened as a young adult because I was trying to help my friend, trying to be trying to save my friend, right? So I was a threat to her partner who was abusing her. He found me to be a threat because obviously I was there to try to protect my friend. And so my life was threatened by this guy too. So it's like as an adult, it's very scary as well. It's not just as scary only when you're a child. I mean, it's scary to be in this sort of stuff. It's a bad situation for so many people. But children certainly don't deserve that kind of stuff. As an adult, you have the choice really, unless you're tied up and tied down and in the basement or something. My mom was a perfect example of that. She was not tied up. My mom stayed with my dad. She had every opportunity to leave him. She had every opportunity to get out. She had support. She had people backing her up, telling her, "Hey, you need to get out. This is a horrible marriage. The way that he treats you is not right, your husband." And she stayed because her mind was tied up. So she physically wasn't tied up, but my dad had her mind tied up. She wasn't going anywhere, and she stayed in that marriage until she died. And she never knew a day of having someone in her life that would love her just for who she was, like a partner, like a husband, or someone in her life who would just love her for just who she was. And my mom was abused as a child as well, and then went into this ridiculous marriage with my dad and stayed, and it was just unfortunate to see her spend her whole life in that, you know what I mean? And that's what, I tried to really make sure that I myself as an adult would not do that, because I saw some really good examples, sadly enough, in my own life that I thought, man, I do not want to go that route. I mean, my sister actually went that route, sadly enough, and stayed with the man who, for quite a few years, who was abusive towards her husband, and then finally divorced him quite a few years into the marriage, and then ended up with another guy who was psychologically abusive towards her, and she stayed in that relationship for 7 years, just a boyfriend-girlfriend type thing. So my sister even did it, right? So now my sister, I don't know, I hope she's learned, to set some boundaries and done some work, but I don't talk to my sister, so I doubt it. But unfortunately, because my sister just doesn't want to admit that she has a problem and that she doesn't understand boundaries and that she lets people abuse her, right? So it's absolutely horrific, and it's unfortunate what people will do, right? As you grow up in a certain situation, even if you weren't abused. Many people who were not abused as children end up in abusive relationships as adults, right? But we have to know that that's not right, and abuse is not right, and that we really ultimately, it comes down to trying to save your life. Like, if your life is being threatened and you just feel like, oh my God, like I'm going to be killed in this situation, you know what I mean? Then you really need to work to get out. But you have to be very careful how you do it. Because there's a serious, I study this stuff. This is what we do for Dream Catchers for Abused Children. But I was already doing this before I got, the role of Canada Regional Director for Dream Catchers for Abused Children. I mean, I was looking into this stuff for a long, long time, and especially the last 4 years, because I finally got off the couch 4 years ago and decided to get busy and try to do something to help make a difference in this world instead of just sitting on the sidelines. So I started getting busy and started studying human rights at MRU in Calgary here. And I was involved in a course called International Community Development, but what it encompassed was human rights mainly. It was all about child rights, human rights, mostly. So it was a great course, and I started doing that and then was continually just researching. But I grew up in this stuff, so I know what this is all about, So I've been looking at this forever. And people, you have to be very careful if you're in a domestic violence situation and your life is being threatened. You have to be very cautious how you go about trying to leave the relationship, because many people die trying to leave the relationship. Whereas if they stay, that things will stay kind of status quo, as it is, abusive, but at least you're alive, right? But then sometimes when women or men even, some men too, right? Some men are abused as well. We don't even know the numbers because many men won't report it. But we know that women are abusive. My oldest sister actually became the abuser because she grew up in the home I did. She grew up with my mother, for God's sakes, and my dad. She was 18 years older than me, so she grew up in the same home I did. She became the abuser and actually abused her husband the whole time they were married because because there was no control in her life as a child, and she was witnessing my parents and abuse towards each other and being abused herself, right? All of my siblings were abused the same as I was. I mean, I think there was a couple of us picked on a little bit more than the others, right? But my sister became the abuser instead of being the one to be abused, and she actually abused her husband. And I mean, everybody knew that this was going on. He stayed in the marriage. We kept telling him to get out. Like, we actually would tell my brother-in-law as adults, especially when I became an adult, I'd be like, you shouldn't stay and put up with her stuff, you can't just stay and allow yourself to be treated like that, but he did. He stayed in the marriage, and my sister finally died of cancer a few years back, and he got his freedom finally. But I mean, the man was abused. Like, she physically hurt him. He already had a broken neck from a car wreck. But she actually threw him off the stairs out of their RV, and he broke his shoulder, and his arm was in a cast, and I think she was trying to kill him. She was really dangerous, my sister. She was abusive to her children as well, and so she became the abuser like my mom, right? She just passed the cycle right on. My mom passed the cycle on to us. My sister passed it on to her family. And this can happen. Men are abused, right? I mean, I've seen it firsthand. But the thing is there's more women being abused, and because of the sheer power and the sheer number, that men have over women, and the sheer number of women that end up in shelters and end up in the hospital with abuse-related injuries, or end up dead when you see the headlines out there, it is a serious issue for women, and you really need to be careful how you leave the relationship. So you need to get that information from a professional. So if you're listening to this and you're having troubles and you want out but you don't know how to go about getting out, I would contact a professional. I would talk to somebody at the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the NCADV, or domesticviolence.org, or any of those websites where they have a toll-free hotline where you can be anonymous, right? And you can actually talk to somebody or somebody in your local community. Like, start checking look through the front page of your phone book, or go online and find out what your community has available to you, right? And then talk to somebody who knows exactly how to help you out, right? Because you need to get that information to save your life, right? It is so important, and you don't want to allow yourself to be killed and murdered at the hands of an abusive partner, whoever it is. I don't care who it is. You need to, that's just so wrong for people to treat people like that. And sadly enough, many women, especially women, when they leave the relationship, they're killed. Now, my mom would not have been killed. My dad used to threaten suicide, and my dad used to threaten that he would murder the family and kill himself. That whole familicide thing, and he was doing this all the time because my dad was borderline schizophrenic. But I think he was more than just borderline. The guy was schizophrenic, straight schizophrenic. So. He used to threaten our lives and then threaten to kill himself too, right? He'd be like, I should kill us all. I'll just kill the whole family, and then I'll kill myself, and God, please, God will be happy, right? Because my dad was very sick, right? He was a sick man. And but I don't think that had my mom decided to leave him that he would have tried to attempt to kill her, right? I think that he would have probably just gone on with his life, because he didn't really love her that much. I mean, my God, he didn't love her at all. I don't know how you could, he says he did, but he says, oh, I loved your mother. Well, she only said that after she died. I mean, after my mom died, then he finally started saying, I loved your mother. But he never said that. I never ever heard my parents say they loved each other growing up. They would never say anything nice to each other, period. They were fighting all the time. So it was always just name calling, and, you're this, and you're a bastard, and you're this, and you're a whore, and, you're the devil, and, this and that, right? I mean, my parents were absolutely horrific towards each other and towards their children, so a bunch of hateful people, right? So, but I don't think he would have killed her had she tried to leave. I think that things would have just been better for her, He would have just gone on in his psychosis, but my mom would have been able to, hopefully get some help and get some counseling for herself. She certainly needed it. She was manic depressive, and she was abused, right? Like I said, it's very important for, I just keep saying that because people, just to get the whole picture, my mom, was abused her whole life. So that's why she became the abuser, just to get some control. She was like, well, I'm going to get some control, so I'm going to abuse. I'm going to be an abuser too. So she took all of her anger and rage out on her children, right, which is very sad, and some on her husband, but mainly it was her children. So she says here, Catherine Petrocelli says, the first thing to do is to determine whether your situation is life-threatening or if you have the luxury of time to plan a careful exit. If your situation is life-threatening, just pack a bag and leave immediately, she says. Now, do whatever you have to do to remove yourself from the situation. And that's where I would get the professional help, because you have to be very careful about what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like Catherine Petrocelli says this here, but I know because I look at all the websites out there, for instance, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, NCADV. If you type into your browser that NCADV or National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, it'll bring up their website, and they have some really good information on there, and they really know what they're talking about. And also domesticviolence.org is another one. And those guys, they have the safety plans right on their website, and you can get information about what you need to do before you leave and what you need to do. You know, and lots of people say, oh, if your life's being threatened, you need to run like now. But, you know, you got to be very careful doing that, because you can lose your life in the process. Because if your abuser wants complete control over you, which would include that you would stay in with the abuser, then sometimes they kill their partners because they try to leave. So you don't want that to happen to you. So make sure that you get the correct, proper information from somebody who's a professional and knows that stuff, right? Because you can't take that for granted that, you know, what these websites or anybody else would tell you would be the right information. I think it's better to talk to a professional and find out exactly what you need to do, because they can help you work through the stuff. They can get it kind of set up that there is a safety net for you, and that the support would already be in place, so that if you did leave, you could go into hiding. You know what I mean? Like you could be whisked away to another city or something, without your abuser being able to track you. You know, going into a safe house and stuff. So you need to be very, very careful what you're doing, and you know, get the information from the professionals. Right? That is just so important, because we know that this is just such a huge issue. You know, she says, like reading down through here, that the police can help keep you safe. If they come while abuse is happening, they will be able to defuse the situation. The police will document that abuse is happening. The police can help you get a restraining order. A restraining order is a legal document that prohibits an abusive person from getting near you or your living arrangements. And you can also ask the local court that handles domestic violence cases for a restraining order, but it is easiest to ask for police assistance with this process. And the thing is that sometimes we see cases where, you know, the police were called, the police were involved, and yet the person was still killed. This person was still murdered in the situation, because it just they just slipped through the cracks. So it's very important to get the right, proper information. You know, there's somebody, Susan Murphy Milano, I believe that's her name. You know, she's got a Blog Talk Radio program here on Blog Talk Radio, as well as on another website that she's advocate for standing up, you know, for people who are involved in domestic violence and tries to help people. And she's got, man, talk about some good information. She's got a book called Time's Up, and I've read that book, Time's Up, and it is some great information for people who are in a domestic violence situation and needing information on what to do, how to go about doing it. She does a step-by-step processing of exactly what you need to do to get yourself out and what you need to do ahead of time if you have the time and it's possible. But her thing is time's up, and big time. You have to save your life, so you have to do whatever you have to do to save your life, right? So I'm gonna just find that website information for you, and I'll give it to you, right? I'm just gonna find it here on the web, because this is so important for people, right? But yeah, I have a comment in the chat room, and you know, so many people's schizophrenia is a big issue, and I actually found a whole bunch of articles on schizophrenia, living with a schizophrenic mother, growing up with schizophrenic parents, right? And you know, it's hard. It's so incredibly hard for people, because most people who have schizophrenia don't even acknowledge that they have it, because they don't realize that they have it. It's a very serious mental illness. And like my dad, even though he was diagnosed borderline schizophrenic by the courts when he was brought up, these charges. Both my parents were brought up on charges, and they had to go see they had to be diagnosed. Like they went and actually had to see a psychiatrist, and they diagnosed my dad borderline schizophrenic and mom manic depressive. So like that's harsh, and so many people have grown up with that. My dad is still living. He's almost 90 years old, and he's still schizophrenic. You know what I mean? He never did get any help or get any counseling for himself. He should have. He was abused as a child as well. Both my parents grew up in the 1930s in a rural area in Nova Scotia, and there was no children back in the 1930s in Nova Scotia were not treated very well. You know what I mean? They were kind of just farm horses, right? That's why my grandmother had a bunch of children just to work the farm, and then just beat on them all the time, just treated them like work like mules, right? That's all they were to her. They weren't children to be loved or nurtured or anything like that. They were there just to do the work on the farm, right? And my grandmother actually even got a whole bunch of orphans from the orphanage that was overflowing in the 1930s and brought them to her home and beat on them too, and then they all ran away. Like my grandmother was a horrible woman. But my dad also grew up under a real strange situation back there in Nova Scotia with my grandparents were born in the late 1800s, and my dad was born in 23. His parents were born in the late 1800s, and they were cousins, first cousins. And so there was all kinds of problems there. And the thing is like first cousins, not a good idea for first cousins to marry and have children in the first place. And not only that, but there was a whole issue with mental illness in that family already. So my dad is it's just passed on to him. But I think there was abuse going on too, as well as some incest and stuff, because they all shared a one-room place, and there was 10 children, 2 adults, and they all shared a bed. All the siblings were made to sleep in this one big bed, and they all. So you can imagine there was 4 or 5 girls and 4 or 5, whichever I can't remember. I know all my aunts and uncles, but I don't really know them that well. I just know their names. But the thing is I met them, some of them a couple times, but that's about it. And they all seem really nice people and everything. They're not like my dad. Those people did not treat their family the way that my dad treated his family. My dad moved his family 3,000 miles away down to New Mexico in the States where I was born, and this way he could treat his family however he wanted to. And people say, my parents were trying to get away from their abusive past, right? That's what a lot of people say, is that my parents were just trying to escape their abusive past because both of them were abused and they wanted to get out of Nova Scotia. And but what I think it was is my dad wanted complete control of his family, and he didn't want his own family butting in, or my mom's family. So because he was already abusing them years ago when they first got married. That there was abuse already happening when they first got married in 1940s, and then they moved to the States in 1960, and then I was born down there. But my dad had complete control then of the family, complete control of my mom, and I believe that was the issue. I think my dad wanted to be able to have complete control with no one stepping in and saying, hey, you shouldn't be treating your children like that. You shouldn't be treating your wife like that, right? He just got away from everybody so he could treat. That's what abusers will do. They'll move people across the country. They'll move their families around all the time so that they can continue to do what they do. And then my parents were brought up on abuse charges when I was a toddler, and then shortly, a few years later, we moved to Canada. So my dad was famous for moving us around to get, so that he could have complete control of the family, right? And that's what abusers will do. But the thing is both of my parents were screwed up, you know what I mean? And they should have got help, right? Absolutely horrible that people, people don't get help, right? My parents were court-ordered to get help, and they didn't get help. I'm looking for this link here for Time's Up, for this book written by Susan Murphy Milano. I believe that's her name, Susan. But she has a Blog Talk program here on Blog Talk Radio as well. And it's just awesome stuff, because she's talking about what you need to do to obtain, here it is, murphymilanojournal.blogspot.com. So it's called Susan Murphy Milano's journal, the Susan Murphy Milano Show, Time's Up, right? And it's murphymilanojournal.blogspot.com if you actually want to check her stuff out. And she's got a book called Time's Up, and it's just an awesome book I've read it, and it's really good for people who are trying to escape abuse and abusive situations, right? So you can check all this information out there. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it. We got about a minute left. So we'll finish up the rest of this article tomorrow morning. And, I'll be back on tomorrow morning, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. I'll be back on tonight as well as on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio, blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. And I'll be on there tonight at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as my own show after that, which would be 12:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right? So take care, everybody, and do whatever you can to get some help, right? And don't suffer alone in silence, and don't allow yourself to be abused and to be killed and murdered. You do count, and you do matter, and you do need to realize that, and you need to do whatever it takes to get yourself some help, right? Because you do deserve to have a good life. I don't care what anyone says. I'll just keep saying that because it's so true, right? So be sure to take care of yourselves. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.